Well, good afternoon, West Ham fans, Master of the West Ham Network. Hope you're all safe and well, my friends. Now, I'm going to put it out there. 𝗧𝗢𝗠 𝗨𝗡𝗥 is massively underappreciated by the West Ham fan base. Do you agree or disagree? We're going to get into it. I'm going to give you the stats and figures about Thomas's West Ham career, and they are quite staggering when you look at them. Let's crack on. 𝗧𝗢𝗡 𝗨𝗡𝗥. How can you not love this man anymore? Look what he did before he came on in the game against Burnley. Seriously, how can you not love that? Kisses the badge. Kiss the badge. Didn't even, and it's not like he knew he was going to be filmed. Love the man. Now you think, as I said, I think 𝗧𝗢𝗡 𝗨𝗡𝗥 doesn't get the credit he deserves by a lot of people. Now, I'm not saying that 𝗧𝗢𝗡 𝗨𝗡𝗥 is. I'm not saying he is a starter or anything like that, but I think he's massively underappreciated in terms of his stats and figures. You know, he's a big lad. He's a huge work rate. You know, goals when it matters, and I yet some feel I think he's definitely underappreciated, and I think that's a fair comment. You know, this is just my opinion. Obviously, we signed him on loan initially in January 2020, a long time ago. Then that was made permanent in December 2020. Moyes talks quite candidly about when he first joined West Ham permanently, and he wanted someone who was gonna basically run. That's what he wanted. He wanted someone, our running stats were down, and he wanted someone who had an engine on him. And 𝗧𝗢𝗡 𝗨𝗡𝗥 was brought in by the West Ham recruitment. So, he's been a fixture in the side, ever since, giving defensive mettle and also attacking returns. So I thought I'd pull some facts and figures, some numbers together. And, some of it is quite staggering. Let's bring up some numbers. There's a lovely picture of 𝗧𝗢𝗡 𝗨𝗡𝗥 from Burnley. 254 appearances. He got his plaque, but it's that was a few games ago, and they did it with Bowen at the same time. It was Bowen's 250th last week as well. So 254 appearances for West Ham since joining in January 2020. 44 goals. And he was actually Hammer of the Year in 2021. 44 goals. That's mental. That puts him well into the top 50 of all-time goal scorers at West Ham, maybe even higher up, to be honest. I'm waiting on Nigel Khan to send me through it. But that is crazy, 24-25 season, 35 appearances in the Premier League, 9 goals. In 2023-24, 7 goals and 10 for the club that season. And from a midfielder, really, and someone who, also contributes defensively, wins headers. There's no denying the fact that he's bled a lot more claret than many of us have when it comes to West Ham. But just where does that sort of sit in comparison to West Ham players of yonder year, so to speak? So in terms of the Premier League, looking at his Premier League, he's 202 appearances in the Premier League, and that's where he currently is in the all-time list at West Ham. So him and Bowen signed at the same time, so pretty much very, very similar. Bowen, if he plays against Bournemouth, he'll go above Steve Potts and Declan Rice, and will go into 5th place. But still, for someone who's, and I think, to be fair, where Bowen has been an ever-present, I think there's been times where 𝗧𝗢𝗡 maybe has been put on the sideline a little bit. But still over 200 Premier League appearances for West Ham. But it's the goals that are the most interesting for me. As I said, he's scored 44 goals, but 38 in the Premier League. When you compare him to that list, he's 3 off Carlton Cole. He just, with his 38th Premier League goal for West Ham at the weekend, it puts him clear of Trevor Sinclair and Andy Carroll. That is mental. He's only 9 behind Mark Noble, who took all the penalties and played almost, he played over twice as many Premier League games as him. He could, it's just crazy. Di Canio, 47 goals. He's only 9 off that. And, another season, anything's possible with Thomas. Absolutely crazy stats. And I think, not just that, but, we've had, verbatimly, I think Moyes, remember during COVID, he said they had to sort of shut the gates because him and Vlad were literally in there training every day. You can tell, it's always the flashy players always grab the headlines, the dribbles, the assists, the big attacking names. And a player like Souček, whose strength is less glamorous. He's physical. He wins his aerial battles. As I said, he's a midfielder who contributes 8 to 10 goals a season, especially with those defensive duties. And as you said, winning Hammer of the Year one year as well just shows that the fans appreciate them. And I think even more so now, how many times has he got us out the shit with a goal? I think in the 2021 season, he was joint top goal scorer with Mikel Antonio for his first full season. He was part of the 22-23 UEFA Cup winning squad. As I said, he's moving to the top 10 of all-time goal scorers for West Ham. Even in seasons where he hasn't hit double-digit goals, his presence there. He's got a lot of goals. He's got a lot of goals which have won a lot of points for us as well. And I think there's if you're looking for someone who's going to give you a reliable output, which is what Thomas does, and game-changing moments. I mean, to be fair, I think we spoke about it this morning. He came on the 66th minute. I think then he scored and then assisted. That's pretty, and I know he's not the best player on the ball. His defensive and passing stats aren't the best. They're not best in class compared to sort of pure defensive midfielders. He is physical and he does a lot of unglamorous work, and maybe it's less visible in highlight reels and, with other players like, Bowen and Paqueta and stuff getting attention. But, I always categorize West Ham players in 2 ways. They're either Billy Bonds players or Trevor Brooking players. They're either silky or they're hardworking and combative. And there's no denying that Thomas Souček is combative and will put his body on the line for West Ham. And that's what we want as a fan base. We want someone who thinks is going to give their all on the pitch. And Thomas does. I know he's not the most glamorous player. I know he's not the most skillful. But what he doesn't have for skill, he brings in heart. And to be honest, particularly the last season and a half or so, we haven't had a lot of heart in the side. We haven't had a lot of fight in the side. We haven't had a lot of just dogged determination. And that's what Thomas Souček brings. And I know the comments, they're going to say, oh, he's this and that. And that's your opinion. But I think he's highly underappreciated by a lot of the fan base. And it's not criticism; it's just my thoughts, And again, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but I just think he's someone that we're going to look back in the next 10, 15 years' time with real fondness. There's certain players, particularly foreign-based players, who get it. I think Souček gets it. I think Pablo Fornals, he got it. I think Vladimir Coufal, he got it. And obviously, don't forget the effect that that Souček had on Vladimir. Bringing Coufal into the club. That was Agent Souček. We took the piss out of it, but it is Agent Souček. So I think value for money as well. You got to think a midfielder. I think he played about 19 million quid for him, something like that, to provide double-digit goals. High defensive work rate and consistency. He's been excellent value for his money, and now playing sort of as a second striker when we need it. His presence, he's got experience, he's got the late winners, key goals, and consistency. Yeah, he's not a flashy player. But he is consistently producing goals every season. Every season. He will never be the poster boy, but I think sometimes he's arguably one of the most important players in the squad. Not saying the first 11, but the squad. And you need people like Thomas Souček in your side. You need those guys who are just going to come on and do a job, and you know they're going to do the job, as long as you're giving them the right job to do. And obviously, there was that time, do you remember when Declan and Souček, they reversed roles and it wasn't working? It wasn't working. And then when they went back to the old way, it worked. You know, there's certain... You have to have certain ingredients to make the cake work, to make the cake taste nice. And sometimes utilising Souček in the right way can bear fruit, and it has done the last couple of games. But anyway, let me know what you think. Is he underappreciated? Let us know in the comments. You know, I think he feels a very vital hybrid role for West Ham, and his numbers back it up as well. You know, I think he's someone who you can rely upon. And I think very much that's not always been the case with West Ham players. And you can do it, Thomas. And just honestly, when I saw that little clip on the West Ham YouTube channel, Twitter thing, of him kissing the badge when he put it on, that was instinctive. That wasn't staged. You know, that wasn't he scored a goal and kissed the badge. I remember, you know, we've interviewed, I think it was Johnny Artson. His agent told him to kiss the badge if he scored against Spurs. That was instinctive. You know, and you saw afterwards when they presented him with the 250 shirt and Bowen, you know, his kids were in the shirt 28 with Daddy on the back or whatever it was, and everyone, he seemed such a nice guy as well. And it, you know, and I just, yeah. I know some people hate him, and you're allowed to hate him. You are allowed to have your own opinion, but I have a warm, fuzzy feeling when it comes to Thomas Souček. I'll be honest. Sort of quite an old school opinion of him. I think he reminds me of a throwback age when there was those players who probably weren't as appreciated in their time, but afterwards that you look back on and say, do you know what? Yeah, he was actually a good player, and actually he did this, and you know, and as again, his stats back it up. You know, his stats absolutely back it up. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. A bit different, but it's international break, isn't it? So we can do things a bit different. As I said, we'll have Hammer's headlines, a few transfer rumours as per usual, and then we've got the Academy show, 6 o'clock, with a special about 𝗧𝗪𝗠𝗔𝗦 𝗪𝗘𝗦𝗧, me boy. Go into a lot more detail about the lad. Anyway, take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay warm, stay humble. Don't forget to give it a like, comment, share, or give it a hype. Give it a hype for Tommy Souček. Let's get this one hyped. Anyway, see you soon. Much love. Bye.